January 26, 1945, 2:20 p.m., frozen fields beyond Holtzwihr, France. Through drifting smoke and the wreckage of battle, something that should never happen in war was happening anyway. One American officer, perched on top of a burning tank destroyer, was stopping a full German company's advance alone. Veterans of the 2nd Mountain Division, specialists brought down from Norway for this offensive, were being halted by a figure who looked scarcely older than a schoolboy, a slight man who might not have weighed more than 50 kilos. Behind the German infantry, 6 armored vehicles, Panzer IVs and assault guns that had smashed resistance across the continent, sat motionless. Their commanders, stunned by what they were seeing, refused to move without infantry support that one American was cutting to pieces with relentless, well-aimed fire. 250 men had blundered into a scenario Wehrmacht doctrine said could not exist. A single defender holding fast against a coordinated assault of tanks and infantry. The arithmetic was unforgiving. 40 exhausted Americans against 250 elite mountaineers and 6 tanks. By every principle of military science, the U.S. position should have collapsed in minutes. Instead, for roughly 1 impossible hour, 2nd Lieutenant Audie Murphy bent the rules of warfare to his will. The road that led to that flaming M10 started far from Alsace, in the cotton rows of Hunt County, Texas. Audie Murphy was born June 20th, 1925, to near penniless sharecroppers. He was the 6th of 12 children, and his childhood was defined by want and obligation. When Audie was 12, his father disappeared. In 1941, his mother died of endocarditis and pneumonia, and the 16-year-old suddenly became the main provider for his younger brothers and sisters. "If I don't hit what I shoot at, my family doesn't eat," he told neighbor Monroe Hackney, a plain statement that explained his uncanny marksmanship better than any compliment could. He could knock down a running rabbit at 50 yards with a .22 others couldn't use to hit a barn. Every cartridge cost money the family didn't have, and every miss meant hunger. Under pressure like that, he trained an eye and a trigger finger that would later terrify German soldiers from Sicily to Alsace. When Pearl Harbor was attacked, Murphy saw a path: steady pay, 3 meals a day, and a way to send money home. Even joining proved a fight. At 5'5" and 110 pounds, the Marines and Navy turned him away. The paratroopers wouldn't take him either. The regular Army finally accepted him on June 30th, 1942, after his sister Corinne submitted an affidavit claiming he was 18. Private First Class David Mosey McClure, who went through basic with him at Camp Walters, Texas, later said, "At first we figured he was a mascot. Looked 14, weighed nothing. The drill sergeants called him Baby and rode him hard. But on the rifle range, those blue eyes went hard and winter cold. He didn't miss." Sicily, in July 1943, was where the farm kid started turning into a combat professional. Company B, 15th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Infantry Division, landed at Licata with Patton's 7th Army. In those steep Sicilian hills, Murphy discovered a fact that would haunt him for years. He was exceptionally good at killing. His rural upbringing had taught him to move quietly, rid ground for cover, and shoot fast and straight. Near Palermo, when a machine gun pinned his unit, he slid around the flank, killed the crew with grenades, and then raked the retreating enemy with their own weapon. Captain Paul Harris recommended him for a Bronze Star, writing that the young private showed a natural aptitude for combat far beyond his years. Italy polished him from promising soldier to near myth. At the Volturno River crossing in October 1943, with his squad shot to pieces, he held off a German counterattack by himself. Using a borrowed sniper rifle, he dropped 5 Germans at ranges beyond 300 yards. The Distinguished Service Cross followed. Staff Sergeant William Paulson tried to describe the method. Murphy didn't fight angry. That's what made it chilling. He fought cold, like he was doing arithmetic. See a German, eliminate the German, move to the next. No emotion, no hesitation, just efficiency. At Anzio, the blood-wet beachhead Churchill labeled the Wildcat, Murphy earned his first Silver Star by knocking out a German tank with a bazooka at point-blank distance. By the invasion of southern France in August 1944, he had survived Sicily, Salerno, Anzio, and Rome. He'd been wounded twice, decorated several times, and carried a reputation that both Americans and Germans respected. This small Texan was lethal. During the advance near Montélimar, when his lieutenant was killed in an ambush, Sergeant Murphy took command. With just 18 men, he organized a defense against a German company of more than 100, held a critical crossroads for 2 hours, and personally accounted for about 15 enemy dead. On October 14, 1944, he received a battlefield commission to second lieutenant. By January 1945, as Company B moved toward the Colmar Pocket, Murphy was no longer the baby-faced recruit who'd enlisted 3 years earlier. At 19, he seemed aged beyond his years. Most of his original friends were dead or permanently out of the line. By then, he had killed over 100 enemies himself. The Colmar Pocket represented winter warfare at its worst. An 850-square-mile German foothold west of the Rhine, the last slice of French ground the Wehrmacht still held. Hitler had ordered it defended at any cost. German commanders had reinforced it with some of their best remaining units, including the 2nd Mountain Division, honed in Norway for snow and cold. For Company B, the days before January 26 were ruinous. In 5 days of fighting, they counted 102 wounded. Every officer except Murphy was dead or evacuated. From a roster of 187 men, only about 40 were still effective. Murphy himself carried a leg wound from shrapnel taken 2 days before, something he kept to himself. Private Anthony Abramsky summed it up. "We were finished. Most of us hadn't slept in 3 days. We were living on cold K rations when we could swallow them at all. Half the guys had frostbite. Machine guns froze. We tried to dig all night, but the ground was iron. When daylight showed our line along the trees with open fields in front, we knew we were sitting ducks." January the 26th broke gray and bitter. A knife-edge wind cut through heavy overcoats. Snow lay 3 feet deep where shells hadn't churned it into frozen mud and ice. Company B held the edge of the Bois de Riedwihr, staring across nearly a mile of open ground toward Holtzwihr in German hands. Murphy placed his skeletal company as best he could. 2 M10 tank destroyers were the only anti-armor he had. He strung his infantry thin along the wood line and set his command post in a drainage ditch that gave a bit of cover, a clear view, and a field telephone to reach supporting artillery. His one reliable way to blunt a determined assault. The attack opened with an artillery preparation at 1300 hours. Tree bursts, shells detonating in the branches, rained shards onto Company B's positions for 30 minutes that felt like hours. At 1400, the German assault appeared. Private First Class Donald Ekman spotted them first. Pennants snapping from 6 tanks spread in attack line, and behind them, God, maybe 250 infantry in white snow smocks gliding like ghosts across the field. Murphy called for artillery immediately, but shell fire alone wouldn't be enough. The attackers were dispersed, numerous, and closing fast. At 600 yards, the M10s fired. Exhaustion and cold spoiled their aim, and the first rounds went wide. German return fire came at once. An 88mm round smashed into the rear M10's turret. The destroyer erupted in flame, and the crew bolted for the woods. The forward M10 tried to shift for a better shot, slid sideways into a drainage ditch on the ice and bogged down. Its crew abandoned it and ran. Around 1420 hours, with both tank destroyers out of the fight and German riflemen within 200 yards, Murphy made the decision that would earn him the Medal of Honor. He ordered his men to fall back into prepared positions in the wood, but he did not go with them. Instead, he sprinted through shell bursts to the burning M10. The rear of the vehicle was fully engulfed, fuel and ammunition cooking off. Black smoke poured from the hull. The heat could be felt 30 feet away. At any moment, the remaining ammunition might explode and turn the wreck into a massive bomb. Murphy climbed onto the tank destroyer and swung the M2 50 caliber Browning to bear. From that height, he had a commanding field of fire across the German approach. He was also completely exposed, a single silhouette on a blazing platform, with only the smoke drifting from the wreck to blur him. From the trees, Private Abramski watched. I saw Lieutenant Murphy climb up on that burning TD while machine guns chattered. Pistol fire from the advancing infantry pinged against the hull and treads. It was the greatest display of guts I ever saw. In trained hands, the M2 is devastating, roughly 550 rounds per minute, effective out to 2,000 meters. Half-inch bullets that chew through light armor and tear bodies apart. In Murphy's hands, it became a tool of surgical destruction. For the next hour, he worked the big gun with icy calm. All the while, he kept the phone line alive to artillery, calling fire ever closer to his own position. The effect was a wall of steel and splinters the German infantry couldn't breach. Sergeant Elmer Brawley, watching from the wood's edge, said, "They got within 10 yards of him. He killed them in ditches, in meadows, at the trees, wherever they moved." The frozen ground had blocked proper entrenchment. The overcast thinned and thickened, shifting visibility. The brutal cold fouled weapons and numbed hands already raw with frostbite. Yet the M10's slight rise gave Murphy fields of fire that mattered. The 50 caliber's reach let him bite at maximum distance, and the smoke yielded a crude screen that spoiled German aim. The tanks, expecting infantry to open the way, realized they couldn't push forward alone. Doctrine demanded combined arms. Without foot soldiers to protect them from close attack, the panzers eased back rather than risk isolation and destruction. Technical Sergeant Morris Wald, peering through binoculars at the battalion command post, later said, "His fire was unbelievably precise. He wasn't just hosing bullets. Every burst was aimed. I watched him rip apart a flanking squad like he was shooting gallery targets." By about 1500 hours, after roughly 40 minutes of nearly continuous firing, the ammunition belts were running thin. The barrel glowed red. The burning destroyer sagged as its road wheels and tracks melted down. German infantry edged to within 10 yards. Private Charles Owen remembered, "We heard the 50 slow. He was running dry. The Germans must have heard it too. They started to rush. He snatched up his carbine and began picking them off. Around 15:10 hours, with ammunition almost gone and Germans closing in, Murphy made the most dangerous call of the day. He ordered the artillery to fire directly onto his position. The forward observer, Lieutenant Walter Weiss-Fenning, refused at first. It was a death sentence, and he knew it. Murphy's reply was flat. "That's a direct order. Bring it now." The first round struck within 50 yards of the burning M10, throwing frozen soil and shrapnel in all directions. Caught in the open, German riflemen were shredded. Murphy, still atop the wreck, was inside the blast fan as well. Fragments sliced his leg, the second wound he'd taken that day, and he kept shooting what little ammunition remained. That blend, his direct fire and danger close artillery, broke the assault. Survivors, perhaps 100, began falling back toward Holtzwihr. The tanks, stripped of infantry and taking more accurate shelling as fire was adjusted, backed out. At about 15:20, after an hour of combat on a blazing platform, Murphy climbed down. His uniform was scorched, and blood ran down his leg. Behind him, the tank destroyer burned on and detonated 10 minutes later. The field in front was a graveyard, bodies scattered across the snow. Historians estimate roughly 50 German dead and many wounded. The remnants were in full retreat. Murphy walked to the tree line where his men waited. Abramsky said he was calm, eerily calm. He checked for casualties from the shelling, made sure his people were intact, then sat down and lit a cigarette as if he'd finished a long watch. His hands were steady. What's striking in the historical record is how little the German side said about that hour. After combing through Bundesarchiv files and veteran accounts, researchers have found almost no first-hand German testimony about the fight. Several factors explain the silence. The units took heavy losses in front of Company B. Many potential witnesses were dead or evacuated. Division-level files were often destroyed in the war's last months, and when an assault fails hard and men fall back disheartened, few rush to write down the humiliation. Operational traces identify the forces. The 2nd Mountain Division provided the main infantry, supported by elements of the 708th Volksgrenadier Division and the 285th Assault Gun Battalion. These were capable formations. The mountain troops in particular were veterans of Norway, Finland, and the Eastern Front, men accustomed to winter and hard combat. Their failure against a single defender cut against every expectation. The 2nd Mountain Division's War Diary entry for January 26th is clipped and bloodless. Attack on American positions near Holtzwihr repulsed with heavy casualties. Enemy resistance stronger than expected. The bland line hides the shock. Post-war German analysis folded the fight into a 1965 study titled roughly Defense Against Superior Forces. Their conclusions pointed to overconfidence based on numbers, tactical rigidity when the initial push stalled, and broken coordination between tanks and infantry. They never tried Company B again. That night, they withdrew from the sector quietly, without waiting for higher orders, for men flown in from Norway with a reputation for never retreating. The psychological blow of being stopped by one American ran deeper than any casualty count. The consequences reached far beyond a single hour of survival. Murphy's stand let the 3rd Infantry Division keep control of the Bois de Riedwihr, which dominated the approaches into Holtzwihr. With the assault broken, the Colmar Pocket's days were numbered. Holtzwihr fell to the 30th Infantry Regiment on January 27, 1945. Within weeks, the German bridgehead west of the Rhine collapsed, pulling roughly 50,000 German soldiers out of the war and freeing Allied strength for the drive into Germany. The lesson was unmistakable. Even elite German formations could no longer bulldoze determined American defenses by counting bayonets and tanks. General Jean de Lattre de Tassigny of the French First Army grasped the importance. The defense of the Holtzwihr approaches by the American 3rd Division, most especially Murphy's action, broke the back of German resistance in Alsace. U.S. doctrine took note as well. The tight integration of automatic weapons and responsive artillery in the defense shaped how Americans held ground for the rest of the European campaign. France remembered in symbol and stone, the 3rd Division earned the right to wear the French fourragère in later recognition, and a memorial rose at the site to keep the memory alive. The Medal of Honor citation, presented by Lieutenant General Alexander Patch on June 2, 1945, offers the military's reserved summary. Alone, exposed, under fire from 3 sides, Murphy's deadly accuracy killed dozens and made the German attack falter. For about an hour, the enemy tried every means to dislodge him. He held. The ceremony near Salzburg gathered survivors of the 3rd Division to watch their comrade receive the highest award in American arms. Brigadier General Ralph B. Lovett and Lieutenant Colonel Harold D. Edson, leaders who had pushed the recommendation, told the audience plainly that Murphy's stand saved Company B and preserved key terrain. Murphy himself refused the title of hero. Asked why he climbed onto a burning tank destroyer, he gave the same flat answer: "They were killing my friends." If one man could do the job, why risk others? The war did not leave him when the shooting stopped. What they called battle fatigue then, what we now recognize as PTSD, shadowed his life. He struggled with sleeplessness, nightmares, and hypervigilance so intense he slept with a loaded pistol under his pillow, then moved to the garage with the lights on to keep darkness and the memories it carried at bay. "I remember the experience like a nightmare," he wrote of combat. "It was as if a demon had taken hold of me." His willingness to speak about those wounds helped drive the creation of the Audie L. Murphy Memorial VA Hospital in San Antonio in 1973, 2 years after he died in a plane crash at 45. His first marriage, to actress Wanda Hendricks, lasted 16 months before PTSD tore it apart. She said he seemed like 2 different men, charming, funny, generous in daylight, but at night, a haunted soldier who patrolled the house with a gun and hid from darkness that brought back night patrols. Despite his own pain, Murphy used his voice for others. In 1966, he wrote in the Saturday Evening Post that nightmares had become as constant as breathing. He could afford doctors and treatment, he said. Many veterans could not. What about the thousands coming back from Vietnam with the same injuries of the mind? Part of Murphy's effect at Holtzwihr lay in the tools he used and how he used them. John Browning's M2 heavy machine gun, designed in 1918, may have been the finest weapon of its class in the war. The 50 BMG round could pierce an inch of armor at 100 yards, and each bullet carried roughly 13,000 foot-pounds of energy. Energy that tore through cover and flesh alike. An M10 tank destroyer typically carried around 1,000 rounds of 50 ammunition and 51 rounds for its 3-inch main gun, along with hundreds of gallons of gasoline for the engine. When the German 88mm round hit, it ignited fuel and set off a furnace that likely exceeded 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The fact that the vehicle burned for over an hour before a major explosion was close to miraculous. Murphy was standing on a bomb with the fuse already lit. The artillery he directed mattered just as much. A 105mm howitzer could throw a 33-pound high explosive shell over 11 kilometers. The blast lethally covered about 50 meters, with fragments dangerous far beyond. Adjusting that fire to within 50 yards of his own position, danger close by any standard, multiplied his combat power exponentially. Analysts have tried to put numbers to the odds. With 250 infantry firing rifles and machine guns, plus 6 tanks with main and coaxial weapons, a conservative estimate is that 10,000 rounds were thrown toward Murphy's perch in that hour. Even with smoke obscuring him and the cold ruining enemy aim, simple probability suggests he should have been struck repeatedly, 15 or 20 times. The physical demands alone were punishing. The M10 weighs over 80 pounds and bucks hard. The steel deck was slick with ice and fuel. The air was hot and choking with smoke. Historians and psychologists keep asking what made him capable of such performance. Poverty and the will to survive? Years of hunting that made shooting instinctive? Or a moment when duty overrode fear? Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, author of studies on combat psychology, calls it a perfect convergence. Technical skill from childhood, motivation carved by hardship, emotional detachment born of early trauma, and, above all, a protective instinct for his men that erased self-preservation. Murphy's own line always cut through theory. They were killing my men. He understood that day had changed him. In a 1968 interview, he said people called what he did heroic. Maybe it was. But he felt inhuman in that hour. A machine built only to destroy without fear or rage, only cold resolve. No American has surpassed his tally of decorations since. He received every U.S. Army Valor Award available, some twice, 33 decorations in all. The Medal of Honor, the Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, the Legion of Merit, 2 Bronze Stars, and 3 Purple Hearts, plus 5 foreign awards from France and Belgium. Yet his deeper legacy lies beyond ribbons and medals. The hospital that bears his name treats PTSD and other psychic wounds of war. His memoir, To Hell and Back, helped thousands of veterans understand they were not alone. At the infantry school, instructors use Holtzwihr to teach defensive fundamentals, leadership under fire, and the integration of support and arms. The Audie Murphy Club honors NCOs who embody his brand of selfless leadership. Master Sergeant Ronald Johnson of Fort Hood explained why the story endures. Every generation needs proof that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. You don't have to be 6 feet tall or born into a military family. You have to care more about your buddies than about yourself. Could a stand like Murphy's happen today? Technology has reshaped the battlefield. Satellites, drones, precision weapons make war more transparent than ever. But war still turns on human will. In Iraq and Afghanistan, Americans saw echoes of Holtzwihr, Staff Sergeant David Balavia's house-to-house fight in Fallujah, Sergeant First Class Paul Smith's machine gun stand in Baghdad, acts born of the same refusal to yield. General Stanley McChrystal put it simply, technology changes war's character, not its nature. One person saying no farther still matters. At the U.S. Army Maneuver Center of Excellence, instructors draw out the essentials for Murphy's hour. Choose ground that favors you, knit fires together so each feeds the other, and never forget the mind of the fight. Murphy didn't only kill enemy soldiers, He shattered their will to move. His relentless, accurate fire taught the attackers that advancing meant certain death. While the country celebrated him as its most decorated soldier, Murphy fought a different war in the dark. The man who had shown no fear on a burning tank destroyer feared the shadows in his own head. His second wife, Pamela, whom he married in 1951 and who stayed with him until 1971, said he carried wounds no one could see. He woke screaming, trapped in battles 20 years gone, and still found ways to help other veterans. The war never ended for Audie, but he turned pain into purpose. His candor about PTSD helped recast combat stress as an injury that demanded treatment, not a failing to be hidden, and it gave thousands the courage to seek help. On January 26, 1945, Audie Leon Murphy proved that one determined human being could halt an army. His stand outside Holtzwihr shredded the Nazi cartoon of soft American troops. These were sons of farmers and factory workers, shaped by Depression-era hardship, as hard as any fighters on earth when it came to protecting their friends. The quiet in German record speaks volumes. In their inability to explain what stopped them, you hear the deepest kind of defeat, moral as well as physical. They met someone better at war than they were, and a part of their fighting identity broke. Today, those fields are farmland again. The craters have been filled. Decades of rain have washed the blood away. But on each January 26th, a small ceremony gathers at the memorial that marks the place where Murphy stood. French citizens, American veterans, sometimes elderly Germans, people who come to remember a day when one soldier proved how far courage can reach. Murphy's story reminds us heroism isn't the absence of fear. He admitted he was afraid. It is action in spite of fear when others depend on you. It is choosing to stand when stepping back would be easier. It is becoming, for one crucial hour, larger than yourself. That is why an army stalled in front of one man for more than 60 minutes. They collided with something doctrine can't chart and mass cannot crush. The unconquerable human spirit carried in a 110-pound Texan who would rather die than see his friends killed. Holtzwihr remains lasting proof that the right person at the right place at the right time with the right reason can change the course of a fight. The boy who hunted rabbits so his family could eat became the man who stopped an army so his men could live. In war, as in life, that leap from the ordinary to the extraordinary is the most startling truth of all.